G'day and welcome back to another DBZ Dokkan video. In this video we're going to be taking a look at the Super Saiyan Vegeta GT and just how good he is after his recent Dokkan awakening in DBZ Dokkan. Now this is a World Tournament unit, so you obtain him from World Tournament summons and he looks pretty interesting. I think at 55% people need to understand World Tournament units have pretty low stats. But I think overall, if you have him Rainbow, he could be a very interesting option for a lot of teams. He has attack and defense of 120%, does an additional attack and defense when performing a super attack. He guards all attacks for one turn from his entry turn, and he gets an additional defense at 80% with a high chance of guarding all attacks as the first attacker in the turn. He gets an additional 40% as the second or third attacker in the turn, and an additional 40% attack and medium chance of performing a critical hit when performing a super attack if he is in the same rotation as a Shadow Dragon Saga ally. Now the big thing with Vegeta is he has Golden Warrior, Saiyan Lineage, Super Saiyan, Royal Lineage, GT, and just in general some pretty good links. Overall he's pretty quite solid, not being on a lot of categories but being a pretty good baseline unit. The big thing with Vegeta that I do like is that he raises defense for 6 turns, which does tend to make him pretty solid. Now overall, Vegeta's in a pretty good position. He's a nice unit with a good link set, a very decent passive, and a relatively solid link set. Now the big thing with him though, is that obviously he has low baseline stats. World Tournament units don't have the same stats as other units, so his stats overall are not really at the exact same level as maybe say some other ones. One thing that I think does play into his favor though is the guard mechanic. Now obviously it's only a high chance to guard, but it is still pretty good, and it does leave Vegeta in a pretty good position as a unit. Overall I think he's a pretty solid addition to the GT Heroes team, as long as you can meet his requirements of having a Shadow Dragon Saga unit in the turn. Now that's obviously a little bit limited, kind of being only SS4 Gogetas and obviously the physical LR units who really kind of highlight that, but I think overall it's not too strict a requirement, although it is obviously, that's not for his guard mechanic, it's for those additional bonuses. It is obviously something nice, but it's not necessary. His guard mechanic is just a high chance as the first attacker. Now if you have him Rainbow, those defensive stacks will add up quite a bit, and he can actually have some pretty solid defense. We see him here with close to 200,000 at 55%, and if we were to stick a defensive equip on him whilst also giving him a pretty good foundational build in terms of additional attacks, he could have some pretty high defense. Maybe looking at something like, 300k, which I think is pretty good. 300k with guard is a pretty solid unit, and I think overall he does gain a lot on super as well, so he could be a pretty interesting first start unit for some teams. I think overall he's got a nice kind of baseline to be an interesting option across the board. Now he doesn't have much utility outside of that, he doesn't provide support, and his offense is somewhat limited, but overall I think he's in a pretty decent position. Obviously in terms of build, if you are going to have a Shadow Dragon Saga unit on the same turn as him, then giving him full additional is not the end of the world. However, if you're not going to have a Shadow Dragon Saga unit on the same turn with him, and instead you're going to go for something else, then you might want to give him some crit. You want to maximize those attacks, or alternatively just give him evasion and try and see if you can just give him some kind of tankiness. I think overall he's pretty good. I wouldn't say he's an absolute rock solid unit as a first attacker, but I think if you can get him to a Rainbow level, I think you could have a pretty fun and interesting option here, who could be a nice elevating option for the Shadow Dragon Saga team, as well as the GT Heroes team in general. Especially if you're running the physical LR units, you'll share a couple links with them. Super Saiyan, GT, Prepared for Battle, all of these will come in handy and are pretty good to pair up with any SS4 or Super Saiyan unit. So I think for me he's pretty solid in that regard, and honestly I'm pretty happy with his overall functionality. I just think because of his hidden potential system, and because of the World Tournament units and the way their stat lines work, unfortunately he is a little bit undercut in terms of raw stats, especially at 55%. If they stuck this passive and the way it worked on like a normal general pool banner unit or like even a DFE unit, then with the stats boost he would actually look pretty good. I think a lot of the times you'd find that's the case with the World Tournament units, but for this Vegeta at 55%, I think he's quite interesting an option. His links overall are pretty good. I think they're quite accessible. GT is good for GT and GT heroes, and there's some value in link leveling him because of that. GT is one of the few super links that's actually very good at link leveling. Saiyan lineage also gives him attack and defense, prepared for battle as well, so you could gain a little bit from link leveling comparative to maybe some other units. Overall, any boost to his offense is also pretty good because his offense is a little bit low, and I think, a nice preset for him. You can see he links up pretty well with any Super Saiyan unit basically, but obviously the thing you want to do is kind of hook him up with Shadow Dragon Saga units. Now that's a little bit more limited overall, just due to the fact that there's a bit of a fewer options in range in the Shadow Dragon Saga. But I think, you do have to consider that ultimately at the end of the day, Vegeta's in a pretty good position. I think for me, he's a fun unit. He's an interesting option. I think he leaves kind of a good impression for me. I think he could be a nice option for a lot of players as that first slot tank. In the second and third slot, he gets the attack boost, but I just don't know if it's worth it. Especially since for him to have viable defense, you do need to maintain his defensive stacks. So having him in the second slot or the first slot is definitely more ideal than having him in the third slot. All in all, Vegeta is a lot of fun, and any unit that can have guard and 200k defense is a good foundation at 55% for potentially being a pretty fun option at a rainbow level. He does gain a little bit of stats at least from that, and it should augment him a little bit, and I think overall if you do a full additional build, you could have a bit of fun with this guy, especially if you link him up nicely. That's it from me. See you in the next video. Till then, take care and bye.